Is on there's going to be at least three sections: cast of initiates, appearance, dress, and behavior. Behavior initiates, cast codes, vows, and prohibition. I'm going to read that for you so that if you have trouble with that, you'll understand. Taruk Abib, Taruk, well, the blessed one known as Taruk Abib Jalashal al Shamini is the one teaching it. And I'll go through and read as we go because it's not often you get a chance in this. It says, while in Second Life, there's usually only one lonely initiate in roleplay on the ship. Many sims have an empty temple, if they have a temple at all. This is not the case in the gore of the books. In the books, there are many initiates, fairly large number of initiates in any city. The books even suggest there's a smaller number of shrines. Um, Either smaller shrines or monasteries between cities where traveling initiates may find hospitality. The initiates are almost universal, well-organized, industrious caste. They have many monasteries, holy places, and temples. Initiate may travel for hundreds of passages and each night find himself in a house of initiates. That's in Marauders of Gore, page 29. While there seems to be caste loyalty among initiates and relations are generally friendly among them, there's no central authority for the caste as a whole in the books. No Gorian equivalent of a pope. The high initiates, I hate when that happens. The high initiate of Ard tried to claim this authority, but his claim is disputed by the initiates of the other city. At the end of this long but speedily delivered paper, refrains were rapidly furnished by the initiates massed about him. He cried, O priests, kings, let our last sacrifice turn inside your wrath. Let us sacrifice, please, your nostrils, and now consent to hear our pleas. It is offered by Oam, chief among the high initiates of Gore. No, cried the number of other initiates. The high initiates of various other cities I knew that the high initiates are followed the policy of the high initiate before him, wished to claim heterogeneity among all the initiates, and claim to his possession. This is why it's always good to read to yourself when you do this. But claimed, of course, is denied by other initiates who regard themselves as supreme in their own cities, priests, kings, and court. Initiates appear to be loyal to their individual cities. In the case of political crisis, the citizens will appeal to both local initiates to intervene on the behalf of one side of a political conflict involving their hometown. Much is common in Earth. In Second Life, the cast has created a ceremony for initiates to bless the steel the city warriors before going into battle. Save our, wept a man, as possession of his initiates through public streets passed. Save us, O intercessors of Peace King, cried the woman. Pray to the Peace Kings for us, cried a man. Magicians of Gore, page 17. As with other castes, each house of initiates or cylinders of initiates in a city is organized as a hierarchy. Since initiates must be celibate by their codes, no one is born officially into the caste. As children, as in most other castes in Gore, the main exception being the caste of assassins. We do not know from the book what happens when this caste code is violated, but in roleplay in Second Life, the child of initiate born to a Kajira, and the Kajiras are killed, and if an initiate's child is known to have been born to a free woman, the child would be killed or enslaved to the caste. If it was proven in a trial in an initiate court that he had fathered the child, the initiate would be killed as well for a major violations of his code. The books do not tell us what qualities initiates look for in those they bring into the cast or how they're recruited. To be a safe guess, potential initiates must be intelligent, enjoy studying and learning a variety of subjects, as well as, if you notice, it's the same as scribes, including arcane gore, prayers and rituals, and mathematics, which is a key component. They are self disciplined, self controlled, not only to learn those academic subjects, but to keep the caste purity codes. In fact, initiates are frequently described as aesthetic, although that does not prevent them from sometimes being greedy for power or wealth. Initiates seem to begin their training at a fairly young age and to advance to the ranks by taking a series of vows. Oddly enough, that's like the Masons in real life. Masons do a series of vows, and that's how they advance to higher level messianic attainment, which could be compared to the initiates in several ways. I noticed that one of the robes, shaved head boys, the one with the bells, was eyeing one of the captives. She was one of those in the line. She was a small brunette, her hands twisted a little behind her in the shackles. She might have been a little younger than he did not think she was aware of his gaze. But perhaps he would leave the caste before it was too late. If it not already too late, before, say, he took his final vows or performed whatever act he needed by means of which his entry to the caste may be effected. Witnesses of Gore, page 455. There's a high initiate in charge of the temples of a city as a whole, appointed by the high council of the initiates in the city, assassins of Gore. A large or important temple would have to have a number of subordinate initiates, very much like the scribes. Temples are very considerable in wealth and power, although we are told they are generally wealthy in terms of the area in which they're found. Poor areas, of course, would have people not as much wealth. We can assume the temple complex of a larger city would have some novices in training in various ranks and types of initiates who carry out various temple functions, such as secretists, who take care of the ritual objects. By the way, the secretary is what the Catholics refer to as the sanctuary. Librarian who cares for the collection of scrolls, a director of music and liturgy, someone in charge of the physical plants such as the dormitory, offices and kitchen, a kennel for the work slaves, and unless the labor in the temple is done by novices, and for singing slaves if the temple has them, and so on. Hence, there's a hierarchy. If Gorian temples follow the example of the Egyptian temples, they might include lector priests, I'm not pronouncing that, who read the sacred texts, Wa'id priests who carry out administrative duties, the semi or high priest, and the, I can't pronounce that, priest who carries out the rituals in front of the altar. Whatever the title, similar function would be carried out by members of the temple. There'd also have to be someone to keep the animals for sacrifice before they're slaughtered, someone to care for them, and none of this is described specifically in the books. On the other hand, most Greek and Roman priesthood was much less institutionalized, was often part-time activity. People had other activities. When he talks about the Greek and Roman, he's talking about the Roman Catholic Church, and then you have what's called the Greek Orthodox Church. One supporting initiative who specifically mentioned is the one in the Caste's second life has labeled the facilitator, who is delegated to cut the throat of the sacrificial bosque or Vieira sacrifice. And so it is evident exempt from the prohibition of caste codes against shedding blood. This will be discussed later in the lecture. I have a video, if you want to go look for it, showing the throat being slit at a sacrifice. Any questions? Of course not, you're not able to, but let's see what they say. I'm reading this out loud because I'm a faster reader. both in print and otherwise. And I can also make comments as I go. And for some of you, you do better when it's in print, vocal rather than read. The relationships between royal peace kings and the non-human species in the caste initiate, who supposedly transmit priest king instructions to men below the mountain, is complex and a little confusing as the books progress. We're told the caste initiates teach the priest kings have no physical being, no shape or form, and is considerably blasphemous to attempt to picture one. We're told that the physical priest kings have no contact with growing humans in general. However, some individuals, like Tower Cabot's father, were instructed by initiates with information they could have only learned from physical priest kings. So the book's a dichotomy. In one sense, they say you don't see him. On the other hand, we find out Tal Cabot's father and others did have contact. He, Tal's father, said, from what he could learn from the initiates who claimed to serve in the intermediaries of the priest king, the men, that the planet Gore had originally been a satellite of a distant sun in one of the fantastically remote blue galaxies. That's in Tarnsman and Gore, by the way, page 32. We are told priest kings obtain information about the Tia's man below the mountains from humans implanted with neural nets in the brain and camera implants, more like an android, or what you see with androids in movies. One Taro Cabot meets at the site of the former city Korobas, described as wearing the robes of initiate, because he is, quote, the one who conveys the will of the priest kings to mortals, even though he was formerly a warrior. Tao sees the golden neural net from the information's brain after the implant, and one is destroyed remotely by priest kings. As I began to cover it with rocks, I noted the remains of the skull, now little more than a handful of shards. The brain had literally been boiled away. The morning light flashed briefly on somewhat golden on the white shards. I lifted it. It was a webbing of fine gold wire. I could make nothing of it and threw it aside. Outlaw of Gore. So no, on the inside they had shards of golden wire and could see and communicate. Initiatives, of I based like I said, androids. Initiatives, as I mentioned, were also sent by priest kings to the distant Pani people at World's End to teach them the Gorian language. Long before any Gorian, long before any Gorian from the rest of the world had reached the Pani Islands. To quote about this from some swordsman, it had already been posted in the first lecture. Long quote to follow. Quote, it was my understanding that a dialect of Gordon was spoken at the world's end, and that the priest kings had seen to this. By the mysterious power and secret sky shift, it seems they had long ago placed initiates among the Pani, perhaps centuries ago, who had taught them Gorian. These initiates, as the legend went, had sought to explore their prestige in an attempt to secure power, and had been done away with. The priest kings, on the other hand, by various manifestations of their power, doubtless the flame of death and such, had made clear the wisdom of retaining Gorian. Ah, he wasn't kidding. It was written, however, that amongst the Pani, in an unfamiliar script or set of signs as well, I understood in the Tahari, whereas a variety of languages are spoken in Gore. Gorean, as you know, is almost universal, like English. But common wisdom in such matters is that priest kings favor a common language as a mean to more easily communicate their views to humans. For example, with respect to technology and weapons laws, it's apparently simpler to do this in one language than in several. Linguistic drift, at least on the continent, is managed by the standardization promulgated in scribal conferences held during the great fairs, held 4 times annually in the vicinity of the Cedar mariners of Gore. By the way, it is the scribes that set the language, set the script, and determine the standardization of the Gorean language. Weights and measures for commerce are also standardized at the fair. Of course, that's the merchants. We may note while the detailed management of the Sadar fairs is carried out by the caste of merchants, the fairs are organized, sponsored by the caste of initiates, and are connected with the 4 great festivals of the Gorean year at the solstice and equinoxes. So there are 4 festivals and not just the one Sadar fair as practiced in Second Life, and they're connected to the solstices and equinoxes. The next one will be the fair of Invara at the summer solstice next month. That's a June festival toward the end. The one after that will be in September, I believe the 22nd. It runs from the 18th through the 27th, I believe. It's also stated, as mentioned previously, that a few among the initiates of Carl Tablet's time, seemed to know the true nature of the priest kings. Do you know the Sadar? I asked him. Enough, he said. Then why? I asked. It'd be hard for you to understand, he said. Then why? I asked. It'd be hard for you to understand, I said. With most, he said, it is as you think. They are simple, believing members of my caste. There are no others who suspect the truth and are tormented, who suspect the truth will pretend. But I, high initiative are, and certain of the high initiates are like none of these. And I, and some others, wait for man. He looked at me. He is not yet ready to believe in himself. I and others who have tried to leave open the gap that he might see and fill it, and some have, but not that he might see it fill it, but some have, but not many. It is for this reason, said the man, that I remain an initiate, priest kings of Gore. Sorry about the repeat. When he kicks that up, it's hard for me to quickly reestablish. So, to make a blanket statement, as Taro and other characteristics in the book do occasionally, that the initiates know nothing of the real priest kings is thus simply not true. Those who play initiates have the choice to play a simple believer, like Tariq, the man standing in front of you, one who suspects the truth and is tormented, one who suspects the truth and will pretend, one who is implanted, voluntary or not, or one who knows the true nature as priest kings. However, the books make it clear the vast majority of human Gorians, even those who are their agents, will not know that the priest kings are non-human species of living beings. To give your initiate or any other Gorian characteristics information usually requires unusual backstory and may not be a good idea. The only reason that is strange is scribes always teach the true nature of the priest kings when teaching, although OCCly, we always let people know what their true nature are when discovering governmentals. And that's in a video that I have. And it's taught by scribe to scribe. But scribes also have third knowledge. Every caste in Gore has its secrets and initiates more than so than most. Although members of other castes do attend some public ceremonies in the temple and carry out some of the limited religious activities, which we'll discuss later in the course, Non initiates are taught very little about the faith. It's nothing like the Bible, a creed, or a catechism, which is accessible even to the literate Gorean laity. Thus, even those who might be fluent in ancient Gorian would not have access to most of the texts describing these activities and beliefs of the initiates. Like I said, it's very much like the Masonic Lodge. Each level is covered by a vow, and their activities are kept secret, and their beliefs are kept secret. So think of them in terms of Masons in real life. Oddly enough, there was very little religious instruction other than encourage all the priests, especially for lower class. And what there was, Thorne refused to administer. In insisting with the province of the initiates, religious matters on the world tend to be rather carefully guarded by the caste initiates, who allow members of other castes little participation in their sacrifices ceremony. I was given some prayers to the priest king to memorize, but they were Old Gorian, a language cultivated by the initiates, but not generally spoken, and I never bothered to learn them. Tarnsman of Gore. In fact, among the Masons, it was known up until the 1800s, at least possibly the 1900s, as the death sentence to reveal the secrets of the Masons. There's a famous case, I believe, later 1800s, where a man was killed for revealing the secrets of the Masons in their trainings. Initiates read and write ancient Gorian, which has a roll in Gore similar to Latin and Greek among the largely illiterate people of the Middle Ages in Europe. Catholic priests spoke ancient Latin. It was not common to the deal that you were able to chain Bibles to the pulpits, but the fact of the matter was that most of the people couldn't read them because they couldn't read Latin or Greek. The scribes, to the extent the physicians, read ancient Gorian also, but the initiates are unique among the caste in speaking it among themselves. That is, the scribe is not going to talk to another in ancient Gorian, although they can read it. This gives them an automatic secret language in which to communicate with each other, especially among the low caste and uneducated. Most non initiates may learn some prayers in ancient Gorian, as the above quote suggests, but they'll probably learn them by rote memorization, much like Catholic prayers, much without functional understanding of the language. I grew up and had to do the Latin Mass. I knew part of it, but what it meant, but not really. Thus is again similar to many older earth religions where the services and prayer, even for lay people, are often in a special ancient sacred language. I believe the Eastern Orthodox also does the same thing. Greek Orthodox was called the Eastern Orthodox Church, which was Eastern Roman Empire. Following the models of the Egyptian religion and the ancient Greek mystery cults, information about the caste and its rituals likely revealed only slowly to members of the caste as they rise in the organization, again, like Masons. They're evidently required to keep it secret from outsiders and even lower level initiates. Among the Pythagoreans, Greek by the way, for example, there was a 5 year period. I think I'm wrong. It may have been Egyptians. There was a 5 year period of probation during which the candidate had to observe all the ritual instructions, but only learn some of the limited secret teachings, mainly of a symbolic nature without an explanation of their meaning. So that if a novice failed his training and left the organization, he wouldn't know anything important about the secret teachings. The initiate would seem by non-initiates as a distant, all-inspiring, somewhat mysterious figure separated from the rest of the populace. Upper-level initiates would be seen the same way by lower-level ones. As with any group whose members have esoteric information interests, including perhaps science fiction fans, gamers, the secret knowledge also serves to unite the cast and give them a sense of being among the Brotherhood. Norman, as usual, gives us a negative twist, ignoring the fact that keeping the rest of the population safe by death from the blue flame, which is what insulates themselves and most Gorians see cast members as doing, this would be seemed as eminently practical and desirable. Their education generally is of little obvious practical value, with this attentiveness to authorize Jesus' dubious, difficult test, purportedly to be revelations of the priest kings. The details and observance of their own calendars, their interminable, phooey. Somebody went and decided to throw in a comment before anybody could read anything. But it paradoxically is sort of teaching impractical, though seems to be a subtle practical aspect. It tends to blind initiates together, makes them independent and muchly different than common man, sets them apart, makes them feel important and why especially privileged. There are so many texts, of course, which are secret to the cast, may not even be available to scholars generally. In this, it is rumored there are marvelous spells, mighty magic, particularly if read backwards on certain feast days. Marauders of Gore. Pythagoras was a mathematician, a very ancient one of the earliest of them. If you study geometry, if I remember right, you'll run into him. Could be wrong, but I believe that's true. The one species of known beings, this one species of beings, or an ancient word, broad beans, were considered unclean. By the way, the priest kings are not to eat beans. The theory is because they were supposedly to resemble female genitalia, although that takes quite a bit of imagination, I think. That's what Tariq just said. So Pythagoras went and outlawed the eating of beans among those who followed him. They were called unclean and resembled female genitalia. At least he thought they did. Well, who knows what kind of females he hung around? Who am I to judge? There we go. In his 1915, excuse me, wrong. In his 2015 Basic Initiates course, Blessed Runyon surmised that non-initiates see the special status of the white caste as a reasonable train off of the stringent restrictions. but initiates have to follow another caste codes. He wrote, my conviction is that these double standards are acceptable to the Gorian laymen because they correspond to double standards as regard to ethical obligations towards the priest kings. Ah, sorry about that. Ethical requirements are not essential for non-Gorian initiate Gorians. What counts more is the external behavior than any internal faith. Initiates as a total, if you read their writings and their studies and their discussions of mathematics, are extremely smart in general. It's not a group to join if you're an idiot. It really isn't. Let's move on. On the other hand, the initiate has to change his life radically and commit his entire existence to the religion. So he should be entitled to deeper knowledge of the religion, such knowledge being supposedly necessary in order to achieve the goal of afterlife. The Pythagoreans believed that men were the property of gods, a concept which, in slave-holding culture, could be quite literal. It is possible that Gorian initiates believe the same, that initiates at least are the priest king's kajuri. Well, that's an interesting thought. And that is a concept I have used in role play. Runyon as. What the secret scripture actually contains has never been revealed in the books. This puts the reader of the novels in the same position as other non-initiate Gorians and Earthlings. Now you have to realize that the priest kings are not to have women, no spouses or sex with women. So it's possible the Gorian initiates believe the same the initiates are in the priest king Kajira. That has more to do with the concept of the Catholic Church that the priests never marry and that they're married to the church. Now we have to remember that while behaving correctly with regard to the caste codes of conduct and carrying out the detailed rituals and ceremony with technical perfection and correct wording is central to the Gorian faith of the caste of initiates. This is true for most liturgical forms of religion on earth as well. This does not mean believers, including initiates, may not have a strong emotional reaction to these ceremonies and genuine and fervent and belief and commitment to the gods. There's no reason to assume most initiates are hypocrites or that, there we go, or that do not believe that a valid ritual should include a proper state of mind and pure intentions in the participants. In fact, I would suggest that's most likely true. Initiates distance themselves from the other castes by having a rigorous and aesthetic set of caste codes and prohibitions, mostly relating to ritual purification. Norman informs us that initiates do follow these codes strictly. Quote, to my surprise, incidentally, that the great majority of initiates, for better or for worse, abide by and respect the regulations of their caste. Witnesses Agor, toward the end of the book, 428. Only once in the book do we read about an initiate, the high initiate of R. R has all the violations, violating one of those prohibitions as he immediately incinerated by the blue flame of death. The priest king's actual motivation for this is undoubtedly quite different from what the white caste would believe, but public death would have reinforced the initiate's conviction. The violation of caste codes would result in swift and probably fatal punishment. They weren't expelled, they were just killed, mostly. No, quote, no one moved. Then, before anyone could stop him, he seized the sword from the scabbard of the assassin and rushed to Talina. Holding it over his head with both hands, he wobbled hysterically, his eyes mad, his mouth sobering, his faith in the priest king shattered. And with it in his mind, he wavered over the girl, ready to kill. No, cried one of the initiates, it is forbidden. Heedless, Heedlessly, the insane old man teased for the blow that would end the life of the girl. But in that instant, he seemed to be concealed in a blush haze. And then suddenly, to the horror of all, he seemed like a living bomb to explode with fire. Not even a scream came from that fierce blue combusted mass that had been a human being. And in a minute, the flame had departed, almost as quickly as it had come, and a dust of ash scattered from the top of the cylinder in the wind. Tarnsman of Gore, page 208. The cast of Second Life Gore has generally enforced this as well. There's been several role plays where errant initiates have been excluded from their cast brothers for violating the rules. Initiates, as I said, are celibate. That's not allowed to have sex with anyone, male or female. They're forbidden to even touch women or to allow women to touch them. And women are not allowed to become initiates. They are forbidden to eat meat or beans, there's that bean, or drink alcohol, which may explain why not everybody volunteers to be an initiate. No meat, no beans, no liquor, no women. Pretty much sucks the energy out of life. Oh, by the way, Tariq adds, or touch males sexually either, of course. I'm wondering if that is a presumption or part of the books, but nevertheless. They also forbidden to bear arms, shed blood themselves. This prohibition is related again to purity codes, not to any particularly pacifistic attitude. And quote, initiates, incidentally, are not permitted by their caste codes to bear arms, or they're permitted to injure or kill. They hire men for those purposes. Assassin of Gore, page 267. Note, it does not mean initiates don't execute people. They just don't do it themselves. I actually know somebody in Gore who was executed by the initiates about 11 years ago. They hired a black cast to do it. No, or I'm sorry. They also, we are told, hire torturers when they feel it is necessary. Quote, the wagon people, of all those in Gore that I know, are the only ones that have a clan of torturers trained as carefully as scribes or physicians in the arts of detaining life. Some of these men have obtained fortune and fame in various Gorian cities for their services to initiates and ubars and to other and interest in the arts of detection and persuasions. Nomads of Gore, page 12. I will note that the initiate court of the Oasis of Farid, now closed, both had a black court of assassins and a torturer of the wagon people on retainer. The emphasis on purity in the examples of the Egyptian and Greek models of the caste, and I'd also suggest the Roman Catholic Church, as I said, makes it highly probable that the initiates would bathe ritually several times a day. These requirements, as discussed in more detail in Note Card 5 in the Handbook of the Initiates, which I have. That book can be found inside the Great Library of Gore, by the way. These codes of the caste influence relationships with initiates with their subordinate who slaughter sacrificial animals, with those who castrate the choir slaves. There's a job I really want. And the caste of assassins. Choir slaves in the book are castrati, eunuchs, like the famous singers of European Renaissance. While the singers are purchased and owned by the temple, the operation, which involves surgery and blood, is done by non initiates. Oh, thank God, I wouldn't have to be an initiate and look at those. I don't think many people in Second Life Gore are going to volunteer for that ceremony. Choirs of young men, quote, often sing in major temples standing outside the white rail. Their heads are shaved. They're most often young slaves who have been castrated by civil authorities. They are trained in song by the initiates to sing with their beautiful soprano voices. Services may include the smells of burning incense, ringing bells, rungs, singing, and chanting. And the rest of the quote. And, quote, portions of the hymn were taken up by four delicate boys stand outside the white rail raised platform. Their heads were shaved. They wore robes resembling those of the initiates. Choirs of such boys often sang in great temples. They were young male slaves purchased by initiates, castrated by civil authorities, and in the monasteries trained in song. I suppose, to one versed in music, their soprano voices were very beautiful, both quoted from Marauders of Gore. I think Second Life needs a men's boy choir of the initiates. They can travel around and sing as sopranos. There is a person at this training that's actually one of the boys, a slave that was castrated to sing in the deals. His name is Hamill. And he's actually in the training. So that's what that's about. So I take that back. There are people that role play that. I'm still waiting for the men's choir to come and travel in Gore, though. Tariq, yes, very much so. As in the case of the ancient Greek sacrifices, during ritual sacrifice of animals, the initiate celebrating cuts a symbolic lock of hair from the mane of the bosk or veer, which is offered and burns it. But the actual slaughter is done by an official called a subordinate. The caste of initiates in Second Life has named this caste official the facilitator and has speculated about his origins and larger role. But this is the only specific mention in the books. The choir boy says, yes, blessed one, the beast serves in the temple, but not all temple slaves are cut zoningly if they are also singers. Quote, the man gestured with his fat hand, and a white boss, beautiful with his long, shaggy coat and his curved, polished horns, was led forward. His shaggy coat had been oiled and groomed and colored beads were hung about his horns. Drawing a small knife from his pouch, the initiate cut a strand of hair from the animal and threw it in a nearby fire. Then he gestured to a subordinate, and the man with the sword opened the throat of the animal and sank to his knees. The blood from his throat being caught in a golden lever held by a third man, Priest King Zagor. As I told you, I have a video made a couple of years ago that shows this ceremony. The boss, the cutting, his going to his knees, and the golden laver held by a third man. So you can actually see the whole thing, including the prayers. Finally, the caste hire the caste hires men skilled in weapons to defend its members and carry out its purposes. Again, they don't do it themselves, but they can hire people. Quote, he did not, said Vera. He tried to prevent me, but I shot out the initiates reprieved, proposing myself as an offering to the priest kings. I did not, of course, tell them my true reason for desiring to come to the Sadar. She paused. I wonder if they knew, she mused. It's not improbable, I said. My father would never hear of it, of course, she said. Then she laughed. Sorry. He locked me in my chambers, but the high initiate of the city came with warriors, and they broke down into our compartments and beat my father until he could not move. And I gladly with them. Priest King Zagor, page 71. So they can hire warriors to come with them. And they, being rich, of course, would have the money to pay the warriors. In fact, Tariq says, the caste do not actually offer human sacrifices any longer. Oh, damn, I missed that opportunity. Tariq, we assume that this might include the private temple guards to keep order as necessary as the temple and protocol individual initiates, but these are not mentioned specifically. The temple may not hire agents to act to uphold the laws of the initiates if the civil government refuses to cooperate in enforcing them. Excuse me, the temple may also hire agents to act to uphold the laws of the initiates if the civil government refuses to cooperate. Now, that is why many cities don't want initiates in it, because they can hire their own warriors to make sure that their laws are upheld if the local government doesn't want to. I'm guessing that's not role played a lot. Just see a city being raided by a bunch of initiates with warriors overthrowing a government. That would be a hell of a role play. Now, one such case was when agents described as henchmen of initiates were sent to stop a group of renegade researchers trying to find a cure for narcosis of the sacred affliction, a disease seen by initiates as sent by the priest kings as the punishment. The initiates go first to the caste of physician to dispute their own members, and then to the high council. Nuts, they flip the passage. Then to the high council city. When all else failed, they sent their own men. Quote, before the next passage hand, said he, armed men broke into the cylinder of the physicians. Their floors were worried, we worked on were burned, and the cylinder itself was seriously damaged. Our work, our records, the animals we used were all destroyed. Several of my staff were slain, others were driven away. I tried to rescue our work, but it was beaten away. Ah, he's flipping too fast. But it was beaten away and our scrolls destroyed. Assassins of gore. The caste prohibition against shedding blood also means that the caste of initiates has an unusual friendly professional relationship with the caste of assassins, who quite naturally are feared and disliked by most other Gorians, as are they, who see themselves as potential targets. In Gore, being a professional assassin is an honorable profession with its own strict caste codes and intense training. It is legal in most cities and proper procedures followed in a hunt, such be the assassin decorated on his forehead with a readily visible mark. Assassins, we are told, and mariners agor, will ask initiates to bless a hunt, and the second life initiates who purify successful assassination after a legal kill. While there's no reason an initiate might also be a legitimate target of a hunt, these role playing assassins in Second Life generally do not take a fee to kill those role playing initiates, and they tend to be very respectful of priest kings, whose favor is helpful in an uncertain and dangerous profession, and the initiates who speak for the holy ones. So in Second Life Gore, there's an interesting relationship between the assassins and the initiates. They will not take a contract on initiates, period. I almost didn't post this, but I realized that there's not enough information about the initiates, and it's rare to hear a talk like this. So I wanted to make sure that those who study Second Life either to become another caste or one that is a scribe or one who wants to know how to role play Second Life, that this be made available. So I decided to go ahead and call it. So, in situations where the Scarlet Caste of a particular city is not likely to act, the temple will usually hire an assassin to gather information or remove those who offend the initiates. I told you 11 years ago, a man was killed, a contract was put out for Black Caste to kill somebody. Initiates are excellent customers of the Black Caste, and assassins generally would try to remain on good terms with them. Second Life Gore. I do know for a fact they do. They may wear white, but sometimes there are rivers of blood. We are told the initiates also have their own courts where people who violate the initiate law can be tried and found guilty or innocent of religious offenses such as blasphemy, heresy. Later in this course, I'll give an entire lecture on the system of law in the court, so I'll be sure and put that out for you. God willing, I'll be here for that. Any questions or comments? This may be the end of the lecture. This is course 3, caste organization. Next lecture is going to be on caste holdings and property given by a temple slave. Okay, this lecture is over. I'm going to close it out.